Welcome back to Auto Garage, where passion for cars meets history in detail. Today we're diving into a car that has sparked curiosity and conversation among enthusiasts, the 1960 Plymouth Fish Cube. It's one of those unusual, almost forgotten models that blends the eccentric spirit of mid-century American car design with the practicality that Plymouth always tried to bring to the table. The Fish Cube wasn't a mainstream star like the Belvedere or the Fury, but it carried with it the experimental flavor of the era. In this review, we'll take a close look at its exterior styling, its performance capabilities for the time, and its pricing, which positioned it within the Plymouth lineup and in competition with other American cars of the early 1960s. When you first look at the 1960 Plymouth Fish Cube, the exterior instantly tells you that this was not a car built to blend in. The name alone suggests something playful, and the design follows suit. The front fascia reflected Plymouth's bold experimentation at the dawn of the decade. Wide-set headlamps dominated the face of the car, each encased in chrome bezels that gave it a futuristic, space-age look. This was an era when automakers were inspired by rockets and jet aircraft, and you can see that in the Fish Cube's pointed nose, chrome grille slats, and sweeping contours. The bumper wrapped across the front like a protective shield, heavy with chrome but integrated into the overall design in a way that gave the car a broad, sturdy stance. The side profile is where the car really earned its unusual identity. Unlike many of its contemporaries that went for sleek, low-slung profiles, the Fish Cube stood taller, boxier, and more upright, which is how it came to carry the Cube nickname. The squared-off roofline gave it excellent interior headroom, and the tall glasshouse meant visibility was better than most Plymouths of the day. But that upright shape didn't make it dull. Fins were still very much in fashion in 1960, and the Fish Cube carried modest tail fins that rose from the rear fenders, less flamboyant than the enormous wings of 1959, but still distinctively American. Along the sides, chrome trim pieces ran the length of the car, breaking up the boxy proportions and adding some flair. At the rear, the car displayed Plymouth's effort to balance practicality with style. The trunk was tall and squared off, providing a huge amount of cargo space for families, but the design team didn't forget to make it eye-catching. Twin round taillights sat within a wide chrome panel, with the Plymouth name stretched across proudly. The bumper was massive and durable, designed to withstand the bumps of urban parking. The whole rear gave the car an identity that was simple yet memorable, not flashy like a Cadillac, but not anonymous either. For those who saw it on the street, the Fish Cube left an impression of being quirky, different, and functional all at once. Performance in the 1960 Plymouth Fish Cube was very much a reflection of the era. The base models came equipped with Plymouth's dependable inline-six engine, a 225 cubic inch powerplant that produced just under 150 horsepower. It wasn't a rocket, but it was smooth, durable, and easy to maintain, which was a big selling point for middle-class families in America. For those who wanted a bit more power, Plymouth offered V8 options, starting with the 318 cubic inch V8 producing around 230 horsepower and climbing up to the larger 361 V8 that made closer to 305 horsepower. With these engines, the Fish Cube could keep up with the performance demands of the early 1960s, especially when paired with Plymouth's TorqueFlite automatic transmission, which was one of the most respected automatics of its time for durability and smoothness. Driving the Fish Cube wasn't about speed or flash, it was about comfort and dependability. The suspension was tuned soft, absorbing the bumps of American roads with ease. Steering was light, though not particularly precise, which was typical of the period. Braking came from drum brakes at all four corners, requiring some planning in emergency stops, but again, this was the standard of the day. What made the Fish Cube special wasn't raw performance but how well it combined utility with just enough style. It was the kind of car that families could pile into for road trips, loaded with luggage, and still enjoy a smooth, comfortable drive across state lines. Fuel economy wasn't a major selling point in 1960, but the six-cylinder models were relatively frugal compared to the bigger version 8s, often managing 15 to 17 miles per gallon, which was respectable for the time. The V8s consumed more fuel, closer to 12 to 14 miles per gallon, but buyers back then weren't too concerned with fuel efficiency. Gasoline was cheap, and what mattered most was that the engines were reliable and provided enough power for everyday use. Inside, the Plymouth Fish Cube offered an interior that reflected both the design trends of the late 1950s and the practical needs of a new decade. The dashboard was wide and angular, Dominated by a horizontal speedometer and push-button controls for the automatic transmission, a futuristic touch that gave the car some high-tech flair. The seats were broad bench seats, front and rear, capable of holding 3 passengers across each row. Upholstery options ranged from simple vinyl to more elaborate two-tone fabrics, depending on the trim level. The upright roofline gave passengers excellent headroom, and the wide cabin made the car feel airy and spacious. Families appreciated the amount of legroom and comfort the car provided, while drivers appreciated the clear sightlines from the tall windows. Technology was basic by today's standards, but in 1960, features like a push-button radio, heater, and optional air conditioning made the Fish Cube feel modern. Safety features were minimal, with seatbelts still optional equipment in many models, but the car's sturdy construction gave it a sense of security that appealed to buyers of the time. Plymouth also emphasized affordability in maintenance, designing the car to be easy to service with parts widely available through Chrysler's dealer network. Pricing in 1960 was one of the Fish Cube's strongest points. The base 6-cylinder model started around $2,000, which placed it well within reach of working-class families and young buyers. Even with added options like the V8 engine, automatic transmission, or upgraded interior trim, prices generally stayed under $3,000. This affordability was key to Plymouth's success during the era, as it allowed the brand to compete directly with Ford and Chevrolet, who dominated the American market with cars like the Falcon and the Biscayne. The Fish Cube positioned itself as a quirky but practical alternative, giving buyers something a little different without stretching their budget. When compared to rivals of the time, the Plymouth Fish Cube wasn't the most powerful or the most glamorous, but it carved its own niche. Chevrolet had the stylish Impala, Ford had the Falcon, and Dodge was pushing its Dart, but the Fish Cube offered a blend of personality and practicality. Its boxy yet charming exterior, spacious interior, and range of reliable engines made it a solid contender in the early 1960s market. While it never reached the sales heights of Plymouth's more popular models, it stood out as an example of Plymouth's willingness to experiment with design and branding. Looking back today, the 1960 Plymouth Fish Cube represents more than just a car. It captures the optimism and eccentricity of the early 1960s, when automakers weren't afraid to try bold new ideas and see how the public responded. It wasn't a muscle car, it wasn't a luxury cruiser, and it wasn't a bare-bones economy car. It was somewhere in between, occupying its own quirky corner of automotive history. Collectors today see it as a curiosity, a conversation piece, and a reminder of an era when design freedom and experimentation gave us some of the most memorable vehicles of all time. As we wrap up this deep dive into the 1960 Plymouth Fish Cube, it's clear that this was never about building the flashiest or the fastest car. It was about creating something practical yet unique, affordable yet distinctive, and it succeeded in leaving an impression that still lingers decades later. Its exterior told a story of quirky design blended with the trends of the space age, its performance delivered exactly what buyers of the time wanted, and its pricing made it accessible to the families who would become the backbone of Plymouth's customer base. Thank you for joining me here on Auto Garage for this in-depth review of the 1960 Plymouth Fish Cube. Whether you love it for its quirky styling, appreciate it for its practicality, or just enjoy learning about cars that dared to be different, the Fish Cube remains an important reminder of why we love digging into automotive history. Until next time, keep your engines running and your love for cars alive.